So howdy folks, welcome to the August edition of Cattle Trails Showcase. I'm Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate. Glad to be with you. The purpose of the Cattle Trails Showcase is to continually highlight the communities, historical elements, museums, and other attractions along the historic cattle trails. Showcase is brought to you by the International Trail Association, of which Dennis Katzenmeyer is president, Michael Brower is vice president, Nancy Lawrence is secretary, and Mary Lou Rivers is treasurer. And Lonnie Steben is our showcase chair. Lonnie, thanks for all your good work through the months. Today, we are returning to Cleburne, Texas, to the Chisholm Trail Outdoor Museum, where we visited before. But there is a brand new addition to that museum, and it's extra special to those of us who are involved with the International Chisholm Trail Association. One of our founders, Doug Harmon, who is online with us today, a past recipient of the Chisholm Trail Champion Award, has been a longtime collector of Western memorabilia, a longtime resident of Fort Worth, and has collected a fantastic assortment of cattle trail and Western memorabilia. And we're so thrilled that Doug is with us online today. His collection of artifacts has found a new home at the museum in Cleburne, Texas. And so we're excited to hear about this new addition to the museum. Steve Myers is there in Cleburne with Carrie today. Our speaker is the executive director of the museum, Carrie Murdoch. Carrie, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much for having us today. I got to tell you, I'm so excited. I don't even think I've come down. My head is still in the clouds from getting Doug's collection here. And I remember saying to him, this collection of his is going to live on long past him, past me, for many, many future generations. It is a phenomenal collection. The museum building is beautiful. And I think it just puts the frosting on the cake here in Cleburne and on our museum. So we have some slides here that we're going to just show you. But before we get to Doug's collection, we're going to start stepping back into the 1800s. When you pull in our front entrance of the museum, we sit on a little over 10 acres right off of Highway 67 and Lake Pat, Cleburne. We call it the beginning of the hill country because everybody goes past here working their way down south instead of getting on the major highway. So we are the world famous Chisholm Trail Museum. We are ranked #1 open air outdoor museum in Texas, even though we have a lot of historic buildings. This is an original town called Wardville back in 1854. And there were 29 families that settled this. We still have some of the original old buildings. It's our main entrance coming in. Sorry, I'm not a photographer. I got sun glare on that. And then we have the longest life-size silhouette of the cattle drive in the nation, we've been told. Bobby Kerr built that. He's a famous metal worker. And then we start coming down the main driveway, and you can see Doug's building, museum building off in the right there. And of course, we have, everybody's familiar with this official marker of the trail. And then, of course, we have in the entrance these concrete markers that says Chisholm Trail and Wardville. That's our main entrance coming in. You cross over a creek at our front entrance, and every time it rains, which is very rarely, but when it comes a gully washer, that floods like Niagara Falls, and you cannot get in the entrance. So now we're in the oldest log courthouse in Texas. A lot of kids love it. It's a log courthouse. The logs are just about petrified. That's how hard they are. We're down in the blacksmith shop. We have 4 working blacksmiths, and we do blacksmith classes out here every month. They make a lot of knives, forge anything and everything. The only thing that we're not doing is shoeing horses. So We need to get some horses out here and have these guys start doing that. Now we're in the Big Bear Native American Museum. It is a world-class Native American collection. This gentleman there in the cowboy hat, he is an archaeologist, one of the leading archaeologists in Texas. And he's giving tours. It's the first building that you do come into. It's a complete timeline of Native American everything, points, blades, everything tool that they had, and the timeline. And now we're up at the Terry building, and it's a dog trot building out of stone, which is pretty rare. And one side of the building is Terry's Texas Rangers. They are a Civil War group, and the other side is law enforcement. That's inside the Civil War Museum. It's an incredible collection. These guys, they shoot their guns, they fire their cannons at every major event and special occasions, weddings and whatnot out here. And now we're in the law enforcement. This is Texas Rangers and law enforcement in here. Great collection of guns and different memorabilia from our Texas Rangers that are in this area. And every kid that comes in this building, if they want, they get deputized. They have to hold their hand up and say the pledge, you know, and they promise not to be bad people, we hope. And now we're in the Nolan River Schoolhouse. It's a one-room schoolhouse and wood desks, wood floor, wood structure. What we don't tell the kids, so the wood floors in this schoolhouse and the desks, there's an old hotel downtown Cleburne called the Liberty Hotel, and it used to be a saloon and brothel back in the day. It was a very exclusive one, if I can say that. So when the owner restored it, he bought it and restored it, they had to take out walls and you know, bring it up to code, and they had all this wood. So they donated it to us, and that's what we built the schoolhouse, the floors and the desks, and inside the jail. But we don't tell the kids it was a brothel. They know saloon, but they don't know brothel. So now we're outside of my office. This is the Stagecoach station. That stagecoach came to us from Hollywood. That was in a lot of Westerns, a lot of John Wayne's movies. It's not an original one. It's built bigger. It needed to look big on the movie screen. So it is one of them in Stagecoach, my understanding. And then we have an outdoor stage that overlooks the museum grounds, and we have concerts and different things on the stage. It's phenomenal. It's a great stage. All of the things that you guys are seeing has all been donated. We've had sponsors, been blessed with a lot of sponsors. Now we start entering the Douglas Harmon Chisholm Trail Museum. This is what it looks like on the outside. The sponsor of this was funny because we had, these are those portable cabin buildings that you can buy and turn them into little houses and whatnot. And the owner of this company donated all of the buildings to us. And so our architect got busy, and now it looks like one large museum. We have red crushed granite out front with all the concrete markers leading your way up to it. It's funny, I will back up real quick. So when we went and talked to Doug the second time, long meeting with a few other people, Bob Phillips, Joe Lysing, myself, and David Murdoch. We had a sign, our sign company draw up a sign that says Douglas Harmon Museum. And I said, Doug, this is what your sign is going to look like. And he said, this is after a long meeting. And he said, well, I'd like it to be in neon lights. And I said, well, that kind of doesn't go with it, but we could do it if you wanted. But anyway, the sign changed up a little bit, but it is phenomenal. So you walk up onto the front of the building, it's all fully landscaped, and a big metal art of a horse head there next to the Chisholm Trail sign. And you walk in, and this is the first room, the first thing you see, the big painting of Red River. That's with John Wayne. And then his saddle collection starts there. Doug, would you like to say anything?
No, just the painting is really a good one. And anyway, and it really, it's, Red River, the famous movie. So anyway, it looks good right at the entrance.
It looks phenomenal. When we started going through Doug's collection, it's just mind blowing how much he had, a lifetime collection. But in the top left of that painting is a headstall, and the bit is pistols. And I just love that piece. So I wanted everybody to see that headstall. Every saddle, every artifact has a tag or an explanation of the time period where it came from, whether, from the saddles to every artifact in there has all been fully cataloged and documented, every picture. Doug had the traveling exhibit of the boards, the panels that traveled around. And so we incorporated that as a staple in this museum. So you'll get to see a big sign right there that talks all about Doug and Judy, his wife, and then just another angle of the saddles. This is still looking at the main first room as you come in. And the reason Doug does not have a cowboy hat on today is because I have it hanging on the ceiling.
Yeah.
And he's asked me for it, and I said, oh, I haven't got it down yet. So there it is, Doug. I'm sorry. But metal ceiling, and we have pictures all the way up the ceiling, cowhides on the floor, and then deer head with another hat. This is still the first entrance, the first room you come in. And then we come out to the right, and we go in the Douglas Harmon Memorial Library. And it's got cowhide chairs in there and a wonderful collection of books and pictures, magazines that he's collected, so people can sit and just pull a book out and read it. Quite an extensive collection in the Memorial Library. Out of the library, we go into the next room where we've got the beginning, the vaqueros, the barbed wire, the headstalls, all of the cases, the glass cases in this museum were all custom made specifically for each spot. They were measured, labeled, built by hand, everything. There was nothing machine made. It was all by hand. And this is just talking the vaqueros coming in and different items, things that they used and had. Down to spurs. I thought I had a lot of spurs. My family does spurs. I've never seen a spur collection until I saw Doug's. So we've got a lot of spurs in here, and they're all labeled. And you try to picture yourself, wow, what did the cowboy do that day? How did his spurs end up with us? It's just a miracle this stuff is still around. These sheets this was one of the first things Doug showed us in the book at the beginning. As cowboys rounded up, or drovers rounded up the longhorns, they drew out the shape, the color, the markings, everything, and which longhorns belong to which cowboy that rounded them up. Doug, do you want to say anything about these sheets right here?
Well, it's just they're really important because it shows how the animals were identified from the standpoint of maybe a clip on the ear, things like that. But they're pretty rare.
Very rare. Yes. Love it. And then we've got the brands and branding irons in here also. And then we have the full cases of all different barbed wires. And they're all labeled, the beginning, the early barbed wires up to modern day. More stuff from the vaqueros. Headstalls. It's just phenomenal. You just, to see all this stuff in one building, you know, you travel around the country and you see pieces here and there, but to have it all in one central location is phenomenal. And then we've got blacksmith collection. Doug even collected blacksmith artifacts. And so an old anvil is out there, the mannequin with the apron, and lots of tools that were used by blacksmiths. And then we have all different stirrups, ox bows, metal one, other spurs. The founder of the 101. Beautiful spurs. I mean, there's just an incredible collection. Then we have U.S. Cavalry collection of headstalls and just different stirrups and horns and boots. And then handcuffs, guns. To think of the handcuffs being put around, I mean, they're not lightweight. They're pretty uncomfortable, I imagine, but seeing the gun collection and handcuffs and locks, just phenomenal. Leg irons. And then we go into another room that's our chuck wagon, and Doug also collected bottles and just different things from that time period. So we called our guy that has restored all of our wagons out in West Texas and said, we need a chuck box and wheels, wagon wheels to go. And this is the size we need. And so he had an authentic chuck box and the wheels. And so he put this all together. And this chuck wagon room, the mural on the wall behind, I don't know if you can tell by this picture, but it's a nighttime scene where drovers are on horseback and the longhorns are all bedded down. The sun's gone down. This mural was done by one of our longtime docents out here. He's a retired artist from Disney. And so this is an incredible mural that he did here in the building. And so this room in particular is our movie and Doug had quite a large collection of movie posters, memorabilia, and of course the bottles, medicine bottles, whiskey bottles and whatnot. But we have original movie posters. And of course we fit in different bits, different headstalls, stirrups, just whatever we could in between it, because the collection is so large. And they're all different. There really isn't a lot of the same thing. Then we have all the tooled holsters, scabbards, another explanation of the chuck wagons, and of course Doug's panels. But you can see we ran those pictures all the way up on the tin ceiling. And then the strange and unusual, we had that. And there you're going to see a cigar. And I didn't know at first what this was. And I said, Doug, what about this? Tell me the story. Go ahead, Doug. Tell them about what you've got there.
Oh, the Custer cigar.
Yeah.
You could probably still smoke it if you if you'd like.
But who would have thought to keep that back then?
Yeah.
That's just incredible. And so then we have just some different things. We have original fly swatter back in the day. We've got ashtrays made out of spurs. Some great pictures
Yeah.
and guns and badges, kid spurs. So just a phenomenal collection. One of the guns, I think a couple of them are so old, you know, they don't work obviously, but you can't pull the trigger, pull the handle. They don't open. They're just so old. And more movie memorabilia. And then we go into the final room, which is the first room that you come in. And this is Doug's personal collection and ties to Fort Worth. And lots of recognition in there. There's plaques and awards and his boots, his personal cowboy boots and hats, more hats. But just great to see the tie with Fort Worth. I didn't mention in that room prior, there is a paddle, an oar that belonged to Amon Carter. And I'm sure if they knew we had that, they'd want it, but it's already in our collection. So, and that was one thing Doug had also as his own personal oar, like for canoeing. So even that is in there. But Fort Worth collection is his ties with the Fort Worth Stock Show, memorabilia. It's rodeo contestants, back numbers. And lots of hat boxes and boots and bandanas and pictures, anything that tied in the Fort Worth collection with Doug is in that first main room. There's Doug's personal boots up there and others. So all his Fort Worth pins, custom spurs. It's a very emotional, moving museum to think that one man's lifetime collection is here, right here with us for the world to see is just, you know, phenomenal. So he had that sign in his collection also. And that is pretty much the Douglas Harmon Chisholm Trail Artifacts and Memorabilia Museum and the Memorial Library and the Chisholm Trail Museum. I didn't have some of the stuff included on the slideshow, so that means y'all have to come out here and see what else we have. But I will tell you, we're never the same. We are always changing and expanding. We just finished up a big photo shoot with Old Gringo Boots, Cowboys and Indians magazine, Cowgirl magazine, and well, there was quite a few out here. Now Old Gringo Boots has made this their official home also, so they're coming on as a premier lifetime sponsor. And so they love the Chisholm Trail. They love the history. And so we're going to be adding some things that represent Old Gringos. So a lot happening. One other thing, Steve and I are venturing now to get all of Texas included in the, go ahead and you can talk about that.
Well, in the Chisholm Trail support of the history of Texas, and also with working with the International Chisholm Trail Association on getting the Chisholm Trail and the Western Trail a National Historic Trail.
So that pretty much concludes our today.
Thank you, Carrie and Steve, and especially Doug. Good heavens, what phenomenal treasure that is there. And I got to put Doug on the spot a little bit. Doug, I know that promoting the history of the cowboy meant promoting the city of Fort Worth. And so, you know, it was a direct tie with your professional career there in Fort Worth. But I would like to ask you, what sparked your interest, your passion in collecting this memorabilia? Why did it mean so much? And then my other question would be, did you have a favorite item in there, or was there a particular challenge that you had? Was there a particular artifact that was a challenge to acquire? So any comments you'd like to add, Doug?
Yeah, I think when I first got appointed as city manager, I was so impressed by the history of the stockyards that it really spurred my interest in all of that. And then through the years, there were just other opportunities to delve into that. And then the Chisholm Trail, theme really became very, very important. I mean, we had in the Sundance Square, we had the Chisholm Trail mural on the side of the building, but there was not interpretation of the Chisholm Trail, which now there are numerous markers and so forth, which, really relate to the Chisholm Trail. So it was a lot of things coming together, and I'm just kind of really pleased to see the artifacts, to be shared with people in now and in the future.
It'll be a treasure that'll be there going forward, and future generations are going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Doug, and I'm so grateful that you and Carrie and the folks in Cleburne have stepped forward to preserve and share these items in this way. There is a question in the chat. There was reference to the vaqueros in the early days of the cowboys in Texas. So the question is, I don't know who can speak to that. In the early days of the cattle drives, what was the role of the Texas vaquero and the former slaves that worked, and some of those became vaqueros as well?
Doug,
Yeah,
do you want to take that?
Oh, Steve, go ahead.
Well, it all started when the Longhorns were brought into Mexico and they made their way up into Texas. With all the missions that were located in Texas, they had the Longhorns there. In fact, if you look at some of the missions here in Texas, you can see on their archives that the Alamo had like 74,000 Longhorns. And the vaquero grew out of the Spanish teaching the people here in this area how to take care of the Longhorns and how to take care of the horses, and that grew into the vaquero.
Thank you, Steve. There's a question in the chat. Another question for you, I think, Doug. Do you have a favorite artifact in your collection, and anything you could share about that?
Well, gosh, that's like, which of your children do you love most? So there was that large photograph of one of the 101 Ranch guys. I think that's the frame and the photograph is kind of one of my favorite items.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Right
There it is. Yeah.
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 Wow, real deal.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Doug, how long have you been collecting?
I think before I was born.
Of this collection.
Yeah. I think since 85, really, when I became city manager, and kind of all through the years, looking for things that kind of fit together historically.
You could tell your other collections.
Yeah.
Another question. This is Dennis again. How long were you CVB director?
16 years.
Okay.
What a great career. And look how the city of Fort Worth has boomed in your time and moved forward, and good grief, it continues. I mean, the trajectory that you started there, it is amazing what has happened with that city. There is a question in the chat, and Steve touched on this, talked about longhorns brought into Mexico and then ultimately moved north. Question was, what does brought into Mexico mean? And Steve, I assume you're speaking of that original migration that came from Spain or the.
That's correct. Yeah, the Spaniards brought the Longhorns into Mexico, and they migrated north into Texas, and they also brought them up to the missions. And when the Spanish Longhorns mixed with the European cattle, they became known as the Texas Longhorn. They made a whole new breed here in Texas of the Longhorns from the original ones.
And then during the Civil War, when men were off involved in the conflict, then those longhorns tended to run free and just run wild in Texas. And so gathering those cattle after the war and trying to get them to market was a huge challenge.
Let me add a little caution here, okay, about the crossbreeding of the original Spanish cattle with European breeds. That really doesn't happen until the late 1870s. They become feral cattle is what happens. That's why they have longer horns, to protect themselves in the wild, because they were largely feral. Spanish cattle are brought up into Texas certainly by 1720 in Southeast Texas. But as far as crossbreeding with Durhams, Shorthorns, Herefords, that doesn't happen until the 1870s. So they evolve to become wild animals. And I think the idea that all cattle in Texas were running wild during the Civil War, I think that's mythology. There were plenty of people who were still herding cows, and most of those people who were herding were women, because a lot of the men were off fighting in the war. So we need to remember that part. Or they were enslaved people, soon to be freed. So we need to be real careful about those kinds of things. Spanish bring cattle into the Americas in 1521. So, they're in Mexico for a couple hundred years before they get up into Texas.
And I might add to what Mike is saying, and that is that Texas, of course, was part of the Spanish Empire up until 1821. During that period, when Mexico gained its independence from Spain. So when you're thinking about Mexico, that as a nation, it didn't become a nation until 1821. And so all of the territory, all the way up to the Arkansas River, basically, and across over to Sacramento, California, was Spanish territory. So the cattle that the Spanish brought over, as Mike mentioned, back in the 1500s, actually Columbus brought the first herd of cattle in his second voyage. So that was very early on, and the cattle industry, as we know it today, basically grew out of the Hispanic styles of ranching on horseback and so forth. So I think it's important that we put that all into perspective.
Thanks, Gene and Michael. Wow, I tell you, the wealth of historians represented in this call today is pretty amazing, and reflects this tremendous history, and certainly reflected in the museum. Other questions or comments for Doug or Carrie? Or
I love the collection, and thank you for including the history of the vaqueros, because they played such an important role. And I'm learning that more and more Blacks, even up to this day, became engaged after the Civil War, very much in the cattle industry, and still prevail today. We have a number of clubs here around Kansas City that are bringing to light the role of African former slaves and African people and now Mexican, rather African Americans who are engaged even in rodeoing and so forth.
Absolutely. So we're looking at this picture. Did you say, Doug, this is from the 101 Ranch?
Yeah, there were three brothers that created that, and I've forgotten the name of this one, but
Joseph
it was
Miller.
the main one.
Well, he looks the part. He could be in a movie today, looks to me.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Any other questions? Terrific. Well, folks, Carrie, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. Let's give Carrie and the folks at Cleburne and Doug Harmon a big round of applause, at least virtually. Carrie, what a treasure. And Doug, thank you for sharing this collection of artifacts and memorabilia that future generations can enjoy.
You're welcome. I will say, either the next issue of Cowboys and Indians magazine, they were here doing a photo shoot in Doug's building. So he'll be making that. Legend lives on.
The legend lives on.
That's right.
And we look forward to visiting and seeing that in person. Couple of notes going forward. I think our Chisholm Trail group is going to have a board meeting and discussion to follow. The main thing is on November 1st and 2nd, there will be the Western Trail Conference in conjunction with the International Chisholm Trail Association in Dodge City, Kansas. And there's you can register, go to Western Cattle Trail assoc.com/conference-info. And you can find information about the conference and a site to register. So we'll be celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Western Cattle Trail in Dodge City on November 1st and 2nd. Watch for more info on that. Lonnie, we have an excellent presentation scheduled for September. You want to say a word about that? We may be adjusting the time, but anything you'd like to say about our speaker? Lonnie, you're muted, I think.
Sorry about that. Yeah, we've been trying to visit all the trails and historic sites and museums and culture along the trails, but one that we haven't done much with yet is the Goodnight Loving Trail. And so we have scheduled a couple of people that have an interest in that trail, and then also the the Charles Goodnight Historic Barn near Pueblo, Colorado, and we'll have a tour of that facility.
So we have some great programs coming up. We have some exciting things happening around the conference. So please be watching for more info on that. And with that, we'll close our Cattle Trails Showcase today. This is Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate, saying thanks for taking time to join us in this place, and come on back next month for our Cattle Trails Showcase. Thanks and happy trails, everyone.
Thank you, Carrie and Steve.
Thanks.
Thank
Doug.
you.
Thank you.